So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Helen, for this lovely introduction. Before starting, on behalf of Alzheimer Europe, I would like to thank Carmel Gagan and Helen Rochford-Brennan for having invited me to this conference and for their wonderful hospitality. Having been invited here, and now realising how difficult it is to get to this part of Ireland, it really brings home to me how lucky Alzheimer Europe is to have people with dementia in the European Working Group who take the time and trouble to leave the comfort of their own homes and travel all around Europe to promote the rights and interests of people with dementia. And I'd like to say how grateful Alzheimer Europe is to the working group for the amazing work that they do, and in particular to Helen in her role as chair of the European Working Group of People with Dementia, but also chair of the board of Alzheimer Europe, member of the board of Alzheimer Europe. Also to Chris Roberts, vice chair, and also to Agnes Houston, former vice chair. And the members of this group regularly talk to leading policymakers and researchers, as well as high-level representatives in the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the World Health Organization, to name but a few, and helping them to understand the key issues and what needs to be done to improve the lives and well-being of people with dementia throughout Europe. So it really is a privilege and a pleasure to be here at this meeting and to have the opportunity to learn from the speakers and members of the audience here, who are many of whom are experts by experience or by training in dementia, all about dementia care and support in rural areas. And it's an opportunity also for me, on behalf of Alzheimer Europe, to gain some real insight into the situation in Ireland and to some extent in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland and England. So I was asked to talk a little bit about Alzheimer Europe and our work in Europe, and in so doing I'll tell you a little bit more about the European Working Group, because I'd like to emphasise that the members of this group are central to European action on dementia. So what is Alzheimer Europe? Well, it's an NGO, a non-governmental organisation, which aims to raise awareness of all forms of dementia by creating a common European platform through coordination and cooperation between Alzheimer's societies throughout Europe. So we currently have 40 member associations in 35 different countries. Our member associations are all national Alzheimer associations, but it's not just limited to Alzheimer's disease, but in some countries, historically that's the way that the organisation developed, and so that's the term used, but in general, it's about dementia. And the Alzheimer's Society of Ireland is one of our member associations, but we have full or provisional members in all member states except Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. And we also have members from Iceland, Jersey, Monaco, Norway, Switzerland, Israel and Turkey. Every 5 years, the Board of Alzheimer Europe develops a strategic plan in which it's stated what the objectives will be for that period of time. And this is then proposed to all member associations at the General Assembly. And the chair of the European Working Group of People with Dementia, at this moment, Helen, is involved in this process because she is a member of the board of Alzheimer Europe. So our Alzheimer Europe strategic objectives are to provide a voice to people with dementia and their carers in Europe, to make dementia a European priority, to promote a rights-based approach to dementia, to strengthen the European dementia movement, and to support dementia research. With regard to providing a voice for people with dementia, in our early work, that means in the mid-90s, we relied solely on people with dementia who came forward and offered to be involved in our work, namely Peter Ashley, who sadly passed away, and James McKillop, who is still very active in dementia advocacy. Peter and James provided valuable input into our work, especially on legal protection and rights, advanced care planning, social support and assistive technology. We just didn't have a system to reach out further to other people with dementia, even though small numbers were starting to speak out publicly. And as more people with dementia showed an interest in the work of Alzheimer Europe, and in recognition of the need to hear the perspectives of people with dementia beyond the UK, we needed a structure to reach out and involve more people with dementia in more countries. So after years and years of debate, especially at board meetings, and after having met in Glasgow with the Scottish Dementia Working Group, who shared their valuable experience and knowledge at national level, Alzheimer Europe set up the European Working Group at its annual conference in Vienna in 2012. And this photo on the left shows some of the early members together with some of their supporters. The members of the group were all nominated by one of our member associations. The photo on the right was taken at the annual conference in Berlin last year, and you can see Helen there in green at the front with Chris Roberts on the left and Carmel on the far left at the front. Members of the working group are nominated or renominated every 2 years, and the group has a chair, currently Helen, and one or more vice chairs, currently Chris Roberts. So the group provides input on all Alzheimer Europe's work. Alzheimer Europe is increasingly involved in external research, and this means more opportunities to involve the working group. There is a growing awareness of the valuable contribution made by the European Working Group of People with Dementia by researchers in the context of PPI. And before I say a little bit more about that kind of involvement, I'd just like to show you this photo, which is of the European Working Group holding the International Mano Amiga Award. The award, in recognition of the group's outstanding work in the field of dementia, was given by Alzheimer Lyon, which seeks to identify and showcase innovative research and initiatives that enhance the health, well-being and quality of life of people with dementia and their families. And Helen went to Spain with my colleague Ana Diaz, who's Spanish, to pick up the award, and so this is a photo of it, so we're very proud of the group for this. When we talk about involving people with dementia in our work and in external research projects, in most cases we're talking about public and patient involvement. So that means research being done with rather than on people with dementia, and with them being involved rather as co-researchers or along the research process rather than as participants in the research, and both are important. We try to ensure meaningful involvement of people with dementia in all aspects of our work and in external projects, right from the beginning of a particular study or project, and sometimes that's even at the stage of putting in a proposal for funding, right through to the end. And we wrote this paper together with Interdem Psychosocial Research Group and members of the European Working Group, and it states our position on how this should be done. So that's in terms of practical things to consider and principles to respect. But it's not set in stone, and we hope to constantly improve our approach to the involvement of people with dementia in research and to learn from our experience of doing so. So turning now to slightly more political issues, Alzheimer Europe has long campaigned for national governments to develop plans to address the needs of people with dementia and their supporters. And in 2006, this led to the signing of the Paris Declaration, which called on governments to develop national dementia plans, to increase funding for AD research, and to carry out pan-European research into the causes, prevention and treatment of Alzheimer's disease. So this slide is a kind of snapshot of the situation in Europe 10 years after the signing of the Paris Declaration. And we can see that national strategies were already in place or under development in 19 EU member states. I won't go through them all, you might be able to work them out. And I just heard from my colleague, Vanessa Chalinor, who's responsible for policy issues and is following ongoing developments, that Sweden now has a national dementia strategy. So I don't have all the details in my head about the content and implementation of the different strategies, but Alzheimer Europe has information about this on its website, and in some cases linked to an actual strategy document. So you can go onto our website, alzheimer-europe.org, and there's quite a lot of information there. In 2012 and 2013, we dedicated our yearbook to exploring and comparing the content of the different strategies. But again, this is a kind of snapshot, so it only tells you what the situation was at that time, but it's still interesting for ideas about the different strategies. A couple of years later, in October 2014, at its 24th annual conference, Alzheimer Europe and its member organisations signed the Glasgow Declaration. It calls for the creation of a European dementia strategy and national strategies in every country in Europe. Alzheimer Europe welcomed the growing recognition of dementia as a public health priority on a national and European level, and called upon European governments and institutions to recognise the role that they have to play in ensuring that these rights of people living with dementia are respected and upheld. So who supports the Glasgow Declaration? Our campaign is supported by 195 organisations from 32 European countries, 150 policymakers from 25 European countries, and that includes 84 members of the European Parliament, over 11,600 European citizens, and here on the photograph you can see again the European Working Group of people with dementia at the time when the Glasgow Declaration was being signed. And again we have Helen there in the middle, and some of you might know Hilary Doxford and again Agnes and Helga in the middle. In the context of developing a rights-based approach, as mentioned in the Glasgow Declaration and as defined in our 2016-2020 strategic plan, one of our aims is to ensure that policies and research involving people with dementia and their supporters are based on ethical principles, values and related concepts. As early as 2009, we set up the European Dementia Ethics Network, initially with funding from the German Ministry of Health, but then after that first year we found other sources of funding. And we've since brought together every year an interdisciplinary group of people with expertise by experience and by training, including, for example, first and foremost ethicists and people with dementia, and then depending on the topic, dementia researchers and service providers, anthropologists, psychologists, people with expertise in disability, assistive technology, even the cinema. It really depends on which topic we were addressing. And then finally, here's just a list of just a few of the European projects that Alzheimer Europe and the European Working Group of People with Dementia are involved in. And it's important to ensure that issues that are relevant to people with dementia living in rural areas are addressed wherever needed. And conferences like this one are very valuable in bringing together the expertise and experience of living well with dementia in general and in rural areas. And I'll be paying particular attention to the speakers and to the discussions today to see how certain issues might need to be addressed in the work that Alzheimer Europe is carrying out in Europe. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention. Thank you again, Carmel and Helen, for having invited Alzheimer Europe to attend this important event. And I'd like to wish us all a very exciting and interesting day.